Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I have a very obscure and very disturbing cult story for you today. Not all cults have hundreds or thousands of members. Some cults are small. They can be just as dangerous, as you will see in this episode. And today's story is even worse, because most of these cult members were not willing participants. They were children. There will be no point in this story where you know what's going to happen next, and it just gets worse and worse as it goes. This story served as the inspiration for the horror film Orphan, but the true story is much worse than anything you will see in the movie. This is the chilling tale of the Mauerova cult family. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. This is a true crime channel where we also discuss dark stories, cult stories, crazy conspiracies, and the subject matter is most often dark. I feel like if you're here, you know this. That said, today's story is especially disturbing and deals with children. You know that I myself have issues with stories about children, and that's why I don't cover a lot of those stories. I chose to cover this one today because I believe this story deserves more coverage. I don't see a lot of people talking about this story. Like I say all the time, we discuss these things because every victim matters, and forgetting their stories is not justice. Every monster has something to teach us, and we discuss monsters so we can learn how they are made in hopes that one day we might be able to stop them. I'm not a huge fan of trigger warnings, but you're getting one today. On the evening of May 7th, 2007, in the town of Karim, Czech Republic, a man named Edward Tvrdy was setting up a CCTV baby monitor in order to watch his newborn son from the other rooms of the house. As he is setting up the monitor, the screen is activated, and what he sees, he cannot understand. On the screen of the monitor is a young boy, completely naked, with his arms and legs tied up behind his back. He was very dirty, he was skinny, and he was eating off the floor. Edward went and got his wife, who had just come home from the hospital, and asked, "Is someone playing a bad joke on us?" As the couple discussed what was happening, they realized that their new baby monitor was picking up the feed of another monitor nearby, and they were horrified. They called the police immediately, and the police began going door to door to find out where the footage was coming from. After an hour or so, the police knocked on the door of a home where two sisters lived, and what they discovered inside has become known as the Cottage of Hell. This is Klara Mauerova. She was 31 years old in 2007. This is her sister, Katerina Mauerova, who was 33 at the time. The two women lived with Klara's children in this house in Karim, or at least that is what the police were told at the time. When an officer knocked on the door, Klara answered. The police told her they were searching for a boy who was tied up and that they needed to come inside. Klara told the police that yes, she had a child, but the child was a daughter, a 13-year-old named Annika, who was sick at the time and resting in the basement. The police believed Klara and had no warrant, and so they said goodbye and continued with their search. After hours of going door to door, the police went back to Edward's house, who had been recording with the monitor throughout the search, and he told the police that he needed to show them the part of the recording where they knocked on the door at the Mauerova house. When the police were at the door of the Mauerova house, someone turned the music up very loud, and the police realized this was because they were trying to hide something. The police went back to the Mauerova home, and this time they weren't asking. They broke the front door down and put Klara in restraints while they searched the house. After a few minutes of searching, cops found a padlocked door underneath the stairs. Klara began panicking and told the police that whatever was behind that locked door she had nothing to do with. Klara shouted that she was renting the house and had never bothered to open the locked door to see what was in the room. She insisted that she didn't have a key, and so the police called the fire department, who were able to break the door down. As soon as they did, the 13-year-old named Annika ran down the stairs towards the locked room. She began screaming and crying and trying to block the entrance to the basement with her body. The officers had to drag Annika away by force and told Klara to try and calm the girl. The door at the bottom of the stairs was then broken down, and when it was, everyone was hit in the face with the strong odor of urine, feces, and vomit. The police made their way inside the room and could not believe what they were seeing. There they found a young boy lying on the cold, hard floor, bound. Klara was shaking and crying and would not give the police any information, and that is when her sister, Katerina, came home. This bitch tried to tell the cops that the little boy liked living under the stairs because he was playing Harry Potter. I really have got to hold it together because we've got a ways to go. The police called in backup and began taking photos of the scene. When they pointed the camera at the young boy, he instantly smiled as though he had been trained to do so, and the cops were horrified. Finally, the police were able to find out that the young boy's name was Ondrej. He was taken to the hospital, and as he was realizing that he was out of the basement, he became more and more terrified. At the hospital, he saw a photo on the wall, and he began screaming that it was a ghost. It had been so long since this little boy had been out, he forgot what a painting was on a wall. The doctors had to take down all of the hanging pictures in the room that the boy was placed in. He was covered in wounds and injuries, and he had long scars on his arms and these pale scars around his groin. And then he had a very large scar on his buttocks. As Ondrej was being examined at the hospital, the other two children in the home were removed. There was a boy named Jacob, and then there was, of course, the girl named Annika. They were taken to a care center, and a child psychologist was brought in to speak with them. The boy was terrified and would not speak. The two boys were taken to a doctor who was horrified to see that Jacob had the same scars and wounds as Ondrej did. The doctor asked Jacob where the long scars on his arms came from, and he told the doctor they were caused by a wire brush. He claimed the pink marks in his groin area came from hornets while the family was on a picnic, but the doctors did not believe him. They know what hornet bites look like. They decided not to push Jacob further. It would later be discovered that the long scars on the arms were from a fork that Klara would use on the boys. And the pale marks in the groin area were cigarette burns. And Klara didn't smoke. She bought the cigarettes solely for the purpose. Yeah, I've said it before. I hope you religious people are right. I hope there is a hell so hot that these monsters are burned for all eternity. They deserve nothing less. Annika, who went by Anna, thank heavens, because I can barely say that, was in another room at the hospital, and she refused to say a word, and she also refused to be examined. When the doctors tried to give her medical attention, she screamed and she bit them. So the doctors brought the girl crayons, markers, and paper. She took a black crayon and began to draw geometric shapes. And then she started doing math equations. Equations that no teenaged child would have been taught at that stage in their life in school. As Ondrej, Jacob, and Anna were held at the hospital, Ondrej began to adjust and to calm down. Anna did not. And 3 days after this horrific discovery, she escaped the hospital through an open window while her caregivers were distracted. All police officers in the area were called in to search for Anna. Volunteers came in droves and joined the search. The entire area was searched for days and no one could find Anna. A week went by, and then a month, and then a year. During that time, people called in sightings of Anna. One photo here shows her with her hair tied up in braids. In another, she was wearing thick glasses and a hoodie. The police tracked Anna, but could never catch up with her until they did. I'm going to come back to Anna in a moment. Klara and Katerina were, of course, arrested and taken into custody. Ondrej and Jacob slowly begin to tell the police of their horrific life inside what the media is calling the cottage of hell. The police found evidence proving that Klara Mauerova was the mother of the two boys who were 7 and 9. Ondrej told his caretakers that his mother had withdrawn him from school, arguing that he was deaf and needed to be homeschooled. The boy was not deaf, so I'm not sure how she got away with that, but Klara promised that she would homeschool the children, again, with the homeschooling. With Ondrej out of school, the family first took a trip. We're going to talk about the trip, and then he was locked in the basement. Ondrej was in that basement from December of 2006 until May of 2007, when Edward discovered him on the baby monitor screen. During this time, I am not going to go into detail here, this boy endured things that we only see in horror films. Whatever you're thinking, it's worse. He was fed inedible items, and then after vomiting, he was forced to consume that. He ate cigarette butts that were used on his body. I'll tell you what, a few hours in a room with Klara and Katerina, I'm not above it. I'm not. The boys were both asked if anyone else was helping their mother and their aunt, Katerina, hide Ondrej, and they said yes. A woman that they referred to as Aunt Nancy was, and also a woman, this woman named Hana Bosova, who was a social worker. The two women knew each other because they both worked at the same kindergarten. The kindergarten both Ondrej and Jacob had attended before they were pulled out of school. Hana Bosova was detained. She claimed this was all a misunderstanding, that yes, the boys were locked in a school classroom once or twice as punishment, but that she had nothing to do with the basement. The cops later found out that wasn't true. The woman known only as Aunt Nancy was questioned as well, but released because there wasn't enough evidence. As the search for Anna continued, people across the nation and across Europe were seeing Anna's photos on the news. Individuals began to come forward stating they knew this person, but not as Anna. And this is where a horrifying and bizarre story gets even stranger. As Anna's photos continued to circulate in the Czech Republic, with everyone in the country now aware of what was happening, and new photos were taken by surveillance came in, people went to the police to inform them that they knew Anna, but she wasn't Anna. Not only was she not Anna, she was not a 13-year-old girl. The person posing as Anna was actually 32-year-old Barbara Skriova. The police begin to look into who Barbara is, and they find out that Barbara and Katerina had even attended the same university. How did this 32-year-old woman pass herself off as a child? Well, first off, she had a glandular disorder. People who knew Barbara told police that she used to be quite overweight. When she worked at the kindergarten, she was heavy. Yes, she worked at the kindergarten too. Barbara had obviously lost a lot of weight, and losing the weight and being very small made her look like a child. Some say she lost like 100 pounds, and she began behaving very shy and childlike. At the hospital, when doctors were able to examine Anna a little bit before she escaped, they saw that she had stretch marks on her belly and on her backside, and they wondered how this could be. Well, now they knew the stretch marks were left from the size Anna used to be. And it was then that the police received a letter. The letter was from Barbara. She stated that she escaped the hospital to help her arrested mother, Klara. Klara was not this girl's mother. Klara was fully aware something was up here. She had to be. Barbara also stated in her letter that the reason Ondrej was locked in the basement is because he was rude and had threatened to kill both Barbara and their mother. The handwriting in the letter was compared to that of the drawings and writings Anna did while at the hospital, and it was determined that the letter was indeed from Anna, Barbara. The boys slowly began to heal. Ondrej made progress. He was fascinated with small things like a toothbrush and a comb. He became talkative and even had moments of happiness. Jacob struggled more. He couldn't feed himself or dress himself or bathe himself. The police began to look into how Klara became the adoptive mother of Barbara, and were surprised to find out that there were some actual adoption papers on file. The cops contacted the adoption agent, who admitted he had only seen the girl once. So let's talk about Barbara. Who was she? Barbara was the granddaughter of famous Czech actor Victor Skala. Victor's own daughter became pregnant, and the child was unwanted. The mother kept Barbara and raised her, but she had a difficult childhood. Barbara suffered from dissociative identity disorder, and she also had that glandular disorder that meant she would never be very tall. Actor Victor Skala was involved in Barbara's life and instilled his beliefs in his daughter and in his grandchildren. What were his beliefs? Victor Scala was a member of the cult called the Holy Grail Movement. The Holy Grail Movement was founded in 1926 by Oscar Ernst Bernhard. After Oscar founded the cult, because, God told him to, what was the first thing he did? We can all say it together. Change his name. We talk about this all the time. These cult leaders love to change their names. Oscar became Abd Ru Shin, which loosely translates to servant of light. Oscar said he was chosen by God, because of course he did, and that he was infallible and had absolute power given to him by God. I feel like a broken record. It is estimated that the Holy Grail cult has around 17,000 followers nationwide, but it is not a unified cult. Each sect is a small group of believers following the same made-up bullshit. The cult members believe that a day of judgment is coming, and that only those who follow the cult and are what is known as sealed, meaning protected, will survive this day. Like, sing a new song. For real. This one is just so played out. Oscar also called himself Messiah of the Tyrol and the Prophet of Vumperberg. This cult has some very ridiculous beliefs, as most of them do. Oscar talked a lot about the spiritual sphere and how as humans we are low forms of consciousness who must find our way back to a higher form of consciousness in order to survive this judgment day. He taught that when the day of judgment came, Lucifer would be vanquished by Jesus, and that, wait for it, those that followed the cult were part of the 144,000 humans sent to Earth to bring in the second coming. Here we go again, right back to Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell and the other fringe Mormon wackos. Everything old is new again with cults. If these people would just ever open a damn history book, they would quickly learn that their beliefs are absolutely nothing special or new. It's all been done before. The details on this are somewhat unclear, but Katerina and Klara are exposed to the Holy Grail movement at university. When they became followers of the cult is unclear. There are reports that Katerina and Barbara met at university and knew each other prior to Barbara's introduction to Klara, which we will discuss in a moment. These two sisters, these women, were already susceptible to something like a cult because they had a very strange upbringing themselves. When Klara was young, she became convinced that she had been chosen by God to receive visions. And even as a teenager, she was talking about the revelations God had shown her. Katerina becomes somewhat of a believer in the fact that her sister Klara is some sort of prophet. Klara gets married at age 20, and the two boys, Ondrej and Jacob, were born of that marriage. When the boys were very young, Klara's visions returned, and she decided that her husband and her two boys were distracting her from the mission she had been sent on by God. During Klara's marriage, she hadn't had much contact with Katerina, but as Klara becomes more and more delusional, her husband has had enough and he leaves her. Sadly, he chose to leave the boys in the care of their insane mother. Klara and Katerina then reconnect, and Katerina is now teaching at the kindergarten. So Klara moves to Katerina's area and enrolls her boys at that kindergarten. Then Klara begins working at the kindergarten as well. So this is obviously a kindergarten run by psychos. Hang on. Now, I will say that up until this time, Klara had been, by all accounts, a good mother. Even though she was delusional, she apparently took good care of her boys. One day, Katerina comes to Klara with some disturbing news. There is a new child at the children's school, and her name is Annika, and she is from Norway. The child has leukemia and no parents. She's an orphan. Katerina convinces her sister Klara that part of their mission from God is to take in this poor, sick child who Katerina reports is only expected to live another 2 to 3 years. Now, Katerina is fully aware that Barbara is a 32-year-old woman and they have a friendship. I believe an attraction. Barbara tells Katerina that she has this game she likes to play where she's a child who needs to be adopted. And she tells Katerina she wants to do it again. Katerina agrees to help Barbara. Barbara's name is spelled B-A-R-B-O-R-A, which is why I'm saying Barbara. Katerina convinces her sister Klara that Barbara is in fact a child in need of a home. And this is when Klara Klara legally adopts Anna. But here's the thing. Katerina told Klara that Anna was in need of medical treatment, and not one time did Klara ever take Anna to the doctor. This is why I said earlier that Klara had to know something was up. Klara would receive text messages from this doctor, who I believe was Katerina, telling her how to take care of Anna. So let's just be real here. Klara knew something was going on. In fact, I think there's a very good possibility that Anna and Katerina were lovers, and because of Katerina's religious beliefs, she couldn't be with Anna, so she decided to undertake this ruse of living with her, so they could be close together. But here's where it gets even sicker. This doctor would text Klara telling her that Anna needed lots of love and affection, and also full body massages that would last for hours. Hours and hours naked everywhere. So there was most definitely some sexual activity going on here. And the whole thing makes me sick, not because they're women, but because it was supposed to be a mother and a daughter relationship. There is an undercurrent here. I can feel it. Worse yet, Anna didn't like Klara's boys. And Anna began to tell Klara stories, made up stories, that the boys were saying terrible things behind her back, that they didn't love Klara, and that they even talked about killing her. Just when you think this story can't get worse, it gets worse, and then it gets worse again. Barbara, as Anna, manipulates Klara to the point that Klara believes her sons are evil, and she begins abusing them. And if you think Barbara, Katerina, and Klara are the only sick, awful, twisted people in this story, sadly, you'd be wrong. The two boys, Ondrej and Jacob, continue to undergo psychological treatment at the hospital, and through this, the police learn more information. The boys begin to talk about the men who visited their home and who were aware that the boys were being abused. One of the men is this piece of shit, Jan Scria, who is Barbara's brother. The other man is this ass, Jan Turek, who was somehow acquainted with everyone we've been talking about today. I don't know how all of these relationships are interconnected. Both of these men are cult members of the Holy Grail movement. Both men also worked at the kindergarten. You know what would be amazing? You know these right-wing nut jobs that scream and holler about Pizzagate, which is some stupid conspiracy theory about Democrats running a pedo ring through a pizza place? Where is that same energy for stories like this one? Where is that same concern? Where is the energy for stories like this? Because while people are out there shouting at the sky and made up bullshit, there are actual atrocities taking place, actual rings of disgusting people in cults who are abusing kids. But have you heard anyone screaming and yelling about this case? Because I sure haven't. Don't worry, I'll be doing all of the screaming and yelling today. Not only were these men and others at the kindergarten aware of this horrific abuse, it comes out later on that they were involved in forging documents, medical documents, stating that all of the children at the kindergarten had some type of terminal disease. Why? Investigators never find out. They never uncover the scheme these guys are working on. These two men, especially, had created fake medical reports stating that each and every one of the kids at the school had leukemia or cancer, MS, and the cops still have no idea why they did all of this stuff, which is disturbing all on its own. The boys begin to tell the police psychologist about how their mother changed, and the police figure it was somewhere around 2006. Klara went from loving and kind to mean and short-tempered, and then the boys begin to talk about the cabin. Oh, boy. Sometime in 2006, in the summertime, the boys obviously don't know the dates. The 5 people living in the house, the Mauerova house, went to a forest cabin outside the city. They told the kids it was a family trip. It was anything but. When everyone gets to the cabin, Jan Turek was there and had prepared 2 dog cages for the boys. The boys remember that as they were caged, they were taken out periodically for beatings. They were held under the water in the bathtub and even forced to dig their own graves and lie down in them. An hour. Give me an hour. Who wants to come with? Because I know there are those of you that want to come with. I'm not going to lie. There's some dark shit that goes through my head when I read these stories and research these stories. At night at the cabin, when the boys were locked up, they could hear singing and chanting as these psychos performed some sort of ritual. They were reading the Bible and talking to Jesus, and then something was done to the boys that I am not going to describe very clearly here. It involved the scars on the boys' buttocks. Flesh was removed by Klara, and passed around and consumed. Yep, as if this story couldn't get any more horrifying, it now involves cannibalism. I can't. After this trip, the boys were never the same. Ondrej went straight from the cabin to the basement and was never let out until the cops found him. Jacob was allowed to go to school, where he was continually beaten and locked up by Hana Bosova. Jan Scria, Barbara's brother, was involved in feeding the boys from dog bowls, and Jan Turek took the boys for walks to train them like dogs. What was their motive? Well, obviously, truly their motive was sadism, because they're sickos. But they claimed their motive was training the boys to believe in God and the Holy Grail movement, that strict discipline is important and they need to be faithful servants to God. Do any of these psychos in these cults read the scripture where Jesus says, if you harmed the hair on a child's head, you'd be better off with a millstone around your neck and drowned? No, because Bible thumpers and a lot of religious people, not all, but a lot, like to cherry pick their scriptures. So, how do they ever find Barbara? You guys, at this point, I've already said it couldn't get any stranger, it couldn't get any weirder, but it does. Sometimes I get my hyperbole out too early in the story. In the summer of 2008, this man named Martin Farner, who was a famous Czech writer and playwright, decided to move his family to Norway for a new job. He took a job at a local theater that didn't work out, so his wife and most of his kids returned to the Czech Republic. Martin stayed in Norway with his son named Adam. Adam enrolled in school in Norway, and very quickly, people were suspicious. Adam was always stressed out, and he always wore clothes that covered him from head to toe, even in the warmer months. His behavior was so strange that he was called in by a school counselor, and in that meeting, Adam told the counselor that he was being sexually abused. By who? Oh, his adoptive father, Martin. Martin Farner is arrested in 2008, and Adam was taken into foster care into a center for kids. Adam then escaped from this center and was seen getting into a car that sped away. On December 19th, 2008, a receptionist at a Bergen hotel called the police to tell them that she had just seen Adam, whose face was all over the news, and he was in the company of an adult man. The man and the boy were located, and as you've probably figured out by now, the boy was Barbara. I cannot. Martin refused to talk to the police or explain this hoax with Adam, and because this was not actually a teenaged boy, but a grown woman, Martin was released. So just let me get this clear. Martin sends his wife and his kids back to Norway, and then he's alone with a 33-year-old woman. I wonder what was going on. I just can't even imagine. A woman who's pretending to be a little boy. So this is some freaky deaky shit. So Barbara has finally been found. She is arrested and she is sent back to the Czech Republic. During testimony at her trial on January 11th, 2008, it became apparent that Barbara was a part of the abusive behavior inflicted on the boys. Katerina and Klara also went on trial. Here are their sentences. Buckle up. Katerina got 10 years, Klara got 9, Hana got 7, Jan got 7, and Barbara got 5 years. I have some choice words for the Czech Republic at this point. That makes me sick. Each and every single one of these monsters is now free. These people are free. They would be locked up for the rest of their lives here in the US, and I am disgusted with the Czech justice system. These people cut flesh from 2 young boys and ate it. Loose? They're loose? What is wrong with you? The 2 boys were returned to their father, Jacob and Ondrej, and Barbara lives in isolation under psychiatric treatment. Klara and Katerina are both living free somewhere in Europe. And you know what I want to say to them? Kiss my old ass. You did horrible things to little children and you deserve to be locked in a cage. And I want to know, are Katerina and Klara under any type of supervision? Because they should be. Do they have contact with children? Is anybody monitoring this situation at all? It is shameful. It is shameful. I hope wherever these sisters are and the others involved are, that they are pariahs and that they are isolated. I truly do. On the off chance that Ondrej and Jacob or their guardians ever see this, I want them to know we are all so terribly sorry for what you have been through. I want them to know that none of it is their fault, and we all hope that you are happy, healthy, thriving, and healing. You deserve to live the good life that you were denied for so long. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Would you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me? It helps a lot. I want to give a special thank you to my patrons, those of you that support me on Patreon. I appreciate you so much. You know, I've got two podcasts. This one's called Dining with Death. This one's called Dark Hearts. This is the current podcast. I post brand new episodes every Monday and every Wednesday, and you will hear some stories on that podcast that you will not hear on YouTube. Both podcasts are on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. You know, our community is involved in a perpetual fundraiser. If you watch this short little video on my channel, it will tell you everything our community is doing to raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that has never been tested. We are trying to raise money to get those kits tested in hopes of solving some cold crimes. I sure appreciate you spending a little bit of your day with me. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.